John, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Joe. I'm going to share my screen here, so give me a second. All right, so everyone can see that, right? Okay, so before I start, quick story about how I ended up here, which kind of ties into this presentation. So before I came here as chief of police, I had planned a trip with my daughter to the Arboretum, and I was online for their website trying to find tickets, and I saw the police department. And I was like, that's interesting. I'm trying to figure out why they have a police department, and that's how I ended up here, that curiosity. But that goes into, since I've been here as well, people always ask, oh, Arboretum has a police department, why is that? And even staff have asked that. So just, we're going to give a little brief history here about why there's a police department, history, and a little overview here. So I'll start with our mission statement. So we actually have our own mission statement, which kind of ties into the organizational statement, and it's we, the members of the Holden Arboretum Police Department, are committed to excellence in law enforcement and dedicated to superior service through proactive and unbiased practices. We shall carry out our duties with humility, compassion, and reverence to human life, while helping people connect to the wonder, beauty, and value of trees and plants. And you see that superior service, it's a core to our mission. Superior service to not only our internal, but our external customers, and that's key to everything we do. External, of course, being members, visitors, guests, neighbors, surrounding community, and then the internal being staff and volunteers. So some examples of those, a lot of you know about this. We provide guidance as far as where to go for customers, answer some questions about the grounds, lockouts, broken down vehicles, basic first aid, customer injuries, access use of grounds, and similar things for staff here as well. And that's just a small portion of what we do here, but just to give you an idea. So the story of the HAPD. So in the beginning, back in 1974, the Holden Arboretum formed its first police department. And the reason I have that in quotes, I'll get into later on, but we'll explain it later on. So it's 2 uniformed officers that were commissioned through Kirtland, the city of Kirtland. And then in 1981, they were laid off because of budgetary reasons at the time. There was a part-time deputy hired in 1988. And then in 1990, the Arboretum hired a chief ranger who was tasked with creating the ranger department. And again, those are in quotes. I'll explain later on about why that is. Then there came the HAPD. In November of 99, the Arboretum Board of Trustees approved the creation of a police department. The Rangers were now police officers. They retained their old uniforms to reflect the connection to nature and natural resources, responsible for law enforcement matters in all of Holden property, Arboretum property, which is over 3,600 acres. You have 2 different counties and multiple townships and municipalities. And at present, you have myself, there's Corporal Tony Pietrowski, and there's one other full-time officer, Pete Green. And we've, presently 2 part-time. We're budgeted for 3, so we're working on a 3rd one filled. So the question that often I've heard is, why do we have police and not rangers? So it's a good question. So was that because we acquired Sperry Road and there's needed traffic enforcement abilities? Was it because we had property in 2 separate counties? Or was it because rangers can't enforce certain laws? Well, what it turns out is that it was basically none of those. We never really had a rangers department, and they just call themselves rangers. And you're probably asking yourself, what does that mean? Well, I'll get to that later, but first, let me give you a little context and history overview here before we get into the whys there. So in the 80s, there was some ongoing criminal activity. Property like Corning Woods, Stebbins Gulch, Little Mountain became very popular locally, and illegal activities really started increasing in those areas. There was a lot of trespassing and property after hours, a series of thefts, vandalism on the property. Some of that trespassing with a lot of kids, they'd come on site after hours, party. There's actually a couple structures burned down because they started bonfires. There was one barn that burned down, from I'm told. And then there was a series of conifer collection trees that were chopped down, stolen to be Christmas trees. And then we started getting complaints from the neighbors because they were going through their property, getting to our property. So the problems on our property were spilling over into neighbors. And so all that culminated with now there's a big worry that all this illegal activity was becoming a liability for the organization. So the Arboretum began looking to establish a police force in 1984, but at the time there wasn't really money for funding anything like that. But then in 1987, you had the Holden Trust, which became a reality. So they have funds now available to be exploring how to establish a police force. They contracted with the Case Western Reserve University and their criminal law program and Lakeland College. And then they began to conduct a nationwide search for a law enforcement executive to help establish a more permanent police presence and then to develop a better way to protect Holden property and staff. Now, in the meantime, they did hire another part-time deputy in 1988 to fill in until they found their chief executive and had a department established. So then in 1990, they hired Carl Ryman, who was the first chief ranger. At this time, and I talked to him about this too, and he was saying that at the time was not uncommon to have 20 or 30 trespassers a night. There was continual issues with poaching the property. A lot of homeless folks were living on the property and off the land, killing deer to use that for their own survival. And then he was tasked also with, explore how to create our own police department. So they were called rangers, but they're actually police officers. The reason is we do not have the authority. The only people in the state that have the authority to create rangers are park districts, and the Arboretum is a nonprofit, so we don't have the authority. But they want to call them rangers because it's more tied to nature. But they're actually police officers, and even though they are Arboretum staff, they are police officers through other local jurisdiction. We didn't have our own police department, so as a police officer, you have to have a commission through the state. And they held their commission with Kirtland, Lake, and County sheriffs. And so they were beholden to those jurisdiction, not the Arboretum. So there's a problem there because if say a chief of Kirtland or a sheriff in Lake or Jaga, one of those officers, he could pull them anytime. So you see a problem there with that. And that was part of the reason why they started to explore getting their own police department. Then there was a lawsuit that occurred, which did involve and wasn't against the Arboretum, but what it did was going back to those commissions at the time, you could hold multiple commissions in one county, but this lawsuit, the result of that was that you can no longer do that. So the officers that are working for the Arboretum could no longer have those multiple commissions, and they only had a commission through Kirtland, which meant they really couldn't be doing anything law enforcement wise in the rest of the properties in Lake County. So that was problematic. The ruling also prevented the organization from having any police liability insurance, which is a big must when you have a police department. So that lawsuit, which again had nothing to do with the Arboretum, it pushed the board of directors to really find a way and create a private police department. And that's what Carl Ryman did. He worked with the UCI to develop a police force. In 1991, the board of directors voted to formally create the Holden Arboretum Police Department. They were now able to obtain our police liability insurance. We had our commission through actually the Arboretum, so we are now no longer beholden to these other organizations. New badges and patches for the officers, which help retain the ranger style uniform to reflect again our ties to nature. So reality versus perception. By and large, media and pop culture have informed our perception of what police do. You have the Dirty Harry movie of the 80s about the Lone Ranger officer out there just doing whatever he wants. You have in the 80s, you had movies like Colors, how gangs infested everything. NYPD Blue did a better job. Then you have others that show the comical side that were all a bunch of goofs, so on and so forth. And other shows like NCIS that make it seem like all we do is just run down and chase people. So the perception with a lot of folks is now that all we do is have vehicle chases. All we do is chase down criminals. All police do is get into scuffles. And all we do is these big crime scenes. But the reality is, having, myself, having worked 25 plus years, a lot of that in actually Cleveland, the reality is most of it is engaging people, walking and talking. That and driving around because you have to patrol different properties. We have to patrol all our 3,600 acres. So doing that, that's a lot of the job. Getting out, checking on things, checking the properties, checking with people, engaging with people, customer service, that's actually a big thing, just to walk and talk. And then report writing. That's the reality. Not as exciting as what you see in the media, but that's actually the reality. So the day in the life of HAPD. So what do we do every day? We typically start at 6 a.m. and we go to about 11 p.m. That varies from time to time. In the wintertime, we don't always stay till 11. Depending on availability, we might not be here till 11. That's what we try to do, 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. In the morning, we unlock the building. It's not all of them, but some of them. check the grounds, open the Sperry Gate. We have our rounds for the main Arboretum, the parking lot, check with guest services. When the Campy Walk and Emergent Tower open, check on the staff there, check the core trails, and you see also the main buildings, we check on those as well throughout the day. Off campus then, the road areas we have as well. You have Strong Acres, Riverwood Farms, South Wisner, North Wisner. And you see the list and there's more and more. So there's a lot of property we have to cover. We can't get to all of them every day, but that's a typical day for us on the job. Then there's all the miscellaneous rounds, like opening up the rare book room, collecting mail when there's people not here to do so. We've especially been doing that with the pandemic, but now that's gone away. I suspect we won't be doing as much. We have our gatehouse escort. When they change personnel at the gatehouse and change cash drawers, we escort them back and forth. We do the bank deposits. On the weekends, we help out facilities. We'll do the water testing, both at the facilities building and then at the pump house over at the LSC property there on Mitchell Mills. And then at night, we close up, check all the buildings, make sure they're alarmed, locked, all the lights are out, check the grounds, and then make sure there's no vehicles in the lot and lock up all the gates. We also deal with wildlife issues. We get complaints about snakes that they hang out by the benches because it's like a nice nesting area, even though they're harmless, but people get scared of them. And then a couple more recent ones you may have heard of. So here's one that was at the Emergent Tower. We had to close the tower down for several hours because of this. If you don't see it, right there is a little raccoon. So this raccoon clawed its way about halfway up on the outside, and it was scaring people, and the fear was that it was going to fall and kill itself. It was kind of hanging on the edge there. So that's not uncommon for us. Similarly, we had one over at the Campy Walk, which shut that down for a while. And if you can't see this one, that's the mom there. It was with its babies on the outside there. And the same problem was, the fear was that it's going to freak out, maybe hurt someone, or they'll fall or hurt themselves. So we had to wait several hours and kind of coax it out of there. We successfully did, but sometimes inconvenience for people visiting. So some numbers for our departments. So last year we keep a log to kind of go through more, not serious, but out of the ordinary incidents. And we had over 1,200 entries last year. 11 of those were criminal suspicious activity reports. So not a whole lot of crime here. We had 0 arrests, which is a good thing. We want to keep it that way. In fact, there's not been a single arrest since I've been here I can think of, maybe one. We had 22 traffic stops. As you know, we can do traffic along Sperry, though we don't encourage it, just for like major violations. 14 of those were speeding, 6 were just blowing through a stop sign. 1 was actually in the parking lot visitor center for just blowing right through and was hitting pedestrians. And then we assisted Kirtland once with a distracted driver complaint. So a lot of what we're trying to do now is do more community outreach engagement. And here's some examples here. We participate in a lot of local police events or community events. That one there, the first one on the left, that's Kevin Goodman. He was at the Chardon's Police Day Out. There you see the second one is Corporal Tony there with We Help Education signs for classes. If you didn't see recently, we unveiled, both Tony and Pete made this from scratch, our little photo op for kids. It has working lights too, but the police car there, which is a big hit. So we're using that for now on. And then we start also with Mentor and Jaga, a little program where police read books to grade children. So we started doing that as well. We also engage other local organizations. Every year we participate in the Cleveland Peace Officer Memorial Parade, which is one of the biggest in the country. Kevin Goodman, again, usually represents us. So he'll be going again this year in May, I believe it is. So we do that. We engage with Toys for Tots, collecting toys for those kids who don't have the means or money for toys at Christmas time. And then local canine groups who come on our grounds, you'll see them sometimes train with their search and rescue dogs. And then once a year, we typically let the Emergent Tower close for local fire departments for training as far as rescue. It's a good way for them to train going down cliffs or long ledges. So they use that for that as well, which is really interesting. They usually come in September, so they do it again. You want to check it out. It's pretty cool. They like having people watch. So we're not your typical police departments at all. We are more like a small town police department in that we deal with nuisance matters versus actual crime more often than not. I showed you about the wildlife. And then we do more interaction with customers, internal and external. And that's both purposeful and just because of the reality of our situation. For me, a key for police is being there to serve, help people, interact, see if they need help, so on and so forth. Now, going by his pictures, I'm not saying we're like Andy Griffith or Mayberry PD. It's the best picture I could find. Maybe something along the lines of like a modern day TV show. Well, maybe not anymore, but for those who ever heard of it, I'm a big sci-fi geek. There's a show called Eureka, and it's kind of similar. They have a police department. It's for a community of scientists. They, instead of working for a bunch of, for the city, or when they work for an organization full of scientists and doctors. So the uniform's similar, and their car more resembles us. So instead of Mayberry, let's stick with Eureka. So some recent projects and work we've been doing. I'm sure everyone knows by now that Tony was promoted to corporal, which reflects his work, and he acknowledges what he's done here for 14 plus years. Besides being an officer and his responsibilities, he manages our deer management program. He also oversees field training for new recruits. So when we have a new hire, he's the main person that trains them. And he recently attended first line supervision course to help support his role and professional development moving forward. We introduced our new patch last year. The old one just wasn't doing it for me and a lot of people. And so we introduced that. This one incorporated the new Arboretum logo along with the silhouette of the tower. And we did the trees again. A lot of thanks to marketing part for that, especially Miranda. She had a real help with that. And also right now, we're trying to get a credit through the state. This is not required, but it probably will be sooner or later. What it is, it's the Ohio Collaborative was created to help agencies utilize better practices and set standards to improve community police relations and develop solutions for current tensions that are going on. We have new policies adapted for 8 to 10 areas covered by this collaborative. And we'll by the end of the year have this done. I'm pretty confident that we'll achieve accreditation from the state by the end of this year. We're also right now working on the CPR first aid training. We just did that recently here at the ARB, and you probably saw the notices for the guard. We'll be starting that in May. The active shooter training, now that people are starting to come back, staff are coming back to the offices, we're going to start getting back into these kind of trainings for floor wardens, fire drills. We had begun that, and then the pandemic hit, which put everything kind of on pause. So we're going to get back into that. We just finished actually, Pete Green, he has a background in radios, so it's really helpful for this, but we did an inventory and validated all the radios, not just ours, but all the ones that are used by staff at our garden and here. So we completed that and then updated where we needed some new radios, and we'll continue to do our community outreach. Just a quick word about the security department as well. Very similar in that it's a non-traditional security department, very customer service driven. You have one security supervisor, one lead, 2 full-time security officers, which we still have a vacancy for one, and then several part-time security officers and parking attendants. Current projects there are ongoing. We want to develop a new policy procedure manual similar to here, and then continue with professional development training and uniformity for that department. So one of the questions that comes up when I hear CBG security is why not police and why not security at the Arboretum? So there's 2 entirely different campuses. At the Botanical Garden, you have University Circle. We're a member of that, and with that comes University Circle Police. So you already have them, they respond like that real quickly. You also have Cleveland Police there. You also have Case Western. So there's no need for another police department in that small area. It's also the Garden, a much smaller area that doesn't cover 2 separate counties and a lot of open spaces. And then CBG also doesn't have the same potential for criminal activity. And what I mean by that is going back to the open spaces. We have so much property out here at the Arboretum with the 3,600 acres. You're not going to have that risk of people going astray on the property garden as you would the Arboretum. And that is pretty much it, unless there's any questions. I'll be happy to answer any.
So Sean, there's a question in the chat from Sandra. You mentioned that the HAPD used to be a ranger station. How does what you do now as police differ from what rangers do? It seems like, oops, I'm sorry. All these questions coming in. Just scroll down.
Sure.
So to get the gist, can you see the question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I lost it. It rolled off my screen.
Yeah, going back to that, again, we called them rangers, but they are still police. Again, we can't have rangers technically because we're not Parks District. there really isn't much difference between rangers and police in the law. They can do the same law enforcement activities, just rangers can only be created by a park district like Lake County, like the Cleveland Metro Parks. The one difference might be there's more of the nature background, doing those kind of things with staff or with the visitors, but otherwise, there's not much difference. We just used to call ourselves rangers, but we weren't ever actually rangers, if that answers that question. Anyone else? If not, thank you all for your time and attention.
Thanks, Sean. It was really helpful and very appreciative of Sean. Just so all of you know, it's taken a lot for Sean, for us all to figure out this full backstory on why we have a police department, why we don't have rangers. All these questions are things that were in all of our minds and our heads. And I'm very grateful for the work that both the Arboretum Police Department and the security team does at the garden. So thank you.